Tom, I sent you a text yesterday. Do you remember what it said?
You did. It was something about, what did it say? Oh, nicknames. Right?
Yeah. Do I have your permission?
For my response?
To read it?
The response that was over text, and I said, no one knows about this.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
I've given up everything else in my life to this podcast.
I wrote, do you have any ridiculous nicknames your parents used for you when you were a lad that stuck with you into it? I said lad.
Yeah, fancy.
God. That stuck with you into adulthood that maybe they use and occasionally get outed in more public spheres. That was my text to you. And you said, my entire extended family and my parents still call me T. I think originally as a way of differentiating me from all the other Tom Metzes, littered with them, your family is, I guess, in my family. I was called T for most of my childhood, including in yearbooks and stuff. Certain people, including soccer coaches, would make fun of me for that sometimes. And I'll say parenthetically, why?
I don't know, but I had these soccer coaches that would say, they would like call roll for soccer and they'd go T. And then one of them, there were two of them, and they'd go 1 lump or 2. every time, 1 lump or 2.
Believe
Good
me.
Stuff.
They're the ones who need work on that. Okay. But I guess T isn't ridiculous, you say. My mother, ! Currently calls me bunny butt and sweetums in texts, which is horrifying, but that doesn't come out in public spheres.
I said you could read it, and I kind of forgot what I'd written.
Yeah. Believe me, that is clear. God, you forgot what you wrote, and that is amazing. I will tell you mine. Okay. I am... occasionally this comes out. Yeah. Occasionally this comes out. It's all a variant of Weasty.
Oh, why?
Yeah. The Weaster Wo-Wo, Weast. Mr. Weast, what's going on, Weast?
Why would that be?
Don't know. That's my dad. He started this thing where Weasty was the thing. And we've already talked about
why it comes from.
I don't know where it came from.
But that's so weird. No. That doesn't that's not even a word. Weast.
I know. It's a made-up thing, and I'm the Weaser. Weasty. I don't even know authentically how it's spelled because it's always been like an artifact of spoken language.
Like Diane
and
Weast?
Occasionally he'll send me a thing and it's spelled out. I'm like, that's not, why is there a Q in there? Like, it just doesn't make sense why it is what it is. But that was mine. And occasionally it'll come out like we're in, we'll be in a public place or like in a grocery store, and I'll be standing by something and he'll say something like, "Hey, Weast, get the carrots." I'm like, come on, really? Grocery store? So there's that bit of baggage that I have hanging over. And then it sort of, from my youth, it really established Pete. Like, Pete was the nickname, the minimization of Peter, because that last R is too much. And so Pete. And then I go to Korea, and I was living in Korea for a while, that. And I had this guy sitting next to me in a movie theater, stranger, don't know him, watching one of the Star Wars re-releases, and he starts petting my arm in the dark theater, because I've got kind of a hairy arm. I've told you this story, right? Hairy arm. I got a hairy arm. And he says pitol, which is like blood, like bloody fur, like bloody fur. And that started a whole thing. I don't even know what the whole like translation is, but pitolegi or something in Korean means something about bloody fur, bloody bear fur, or something like that. Like there's a connection to that, and it's straight up horrifying, and that became a nickname.
Just from
in
between
Korea.
You and that
Korean
guy?
Korean people. I told this story, and my Korean friends were like, "Oh, dope nickname for Pete.
You weasted yourself.
That's gonna stick." I weasted myself. That's what I did. Yeah, terrible.
That
right?
Can we pause for 1 second? I feel like we maybe blazed by just one small detail in that story. A stranger started petting your arm in a theater, and that wasn't... I think you should do your entire anxiety segment just on that, because that's weird. Unless that's a custom. I don't know.
I don't know what to do with that bit of information. So I moved
I get it. You're filled to the brim. Okay, so...
And he was so happy with himself. Like, it's a it's a whole fanfare. And he's like petting my arm and snickering.
And what did you do? Were you like, it's pronounced Weasty?
Okay.
Go on.
All right. We have to move on. I don't know why. I don't know I got to thinking about this. But I started thinking about nicknames. And so I started looking up nicknames, realizing that the nicknames of my friends are, like mine, terrible. They're either stupid or they diminish you in some way, shape, or form. I'm like, how does that even happen? So I started reading a little bit. This isn't like a current news story like we usually do, but I just wanted you to know that nicknames, we need to watch that. It turns out there are people, probably people with terrible nicknames, who have written straight up academic papers about the power differential in nicknames. That the name giver assumes the role of power in a group, and bullies take that on, and like they abuse nicknames when they find them. They do these horrible things. Nicknames connote a deviation from the usual, and thus they separate those who are in the group and those who are outside the group, says someone who probably was bullied because of their nickname. Right. I'm just saying,
you don't think about that, but that makes a ton of sense because it's also the catchiness of it, the stickiness of it.
Yes. Yeah. It can also be flattering. Like I look at T and I'm like, T, that's a good, T, it's a letter. It's
Thomas
a strong letter.
T?
No, look at you. You said T.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a good name. I don't know. Like I know that a taller T came into your life and took that over, but you could very well have carried T.
Too many T's.
And you ended up with like Tommy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't call you Butterbutt, but I will.
Bunny Butt. Get it right.
Oh, right.
Don't be weird. My mom calls me Bunny Butt, not Butterbutt. We're not creeps. So sad.
Anyway, so, like, you're not sitting around being called, like, Iron Thumbs or, Speed.
Not to my face.
Like, you can be...
Super duper.
Right. So I feel like nicknames are there. I'm going to put some links in the show notes because nicknames are straight up scary if they get out. And if you have social anxiety, just know that when somebody gives you a nickname, it could be flattering. It could be not so flattering, and it could be Bunny Butt.
Bunny Butt it is.
Talk about failing up. Oof.
Hey, I got a confession. Been losing all momentum. Just because it's easy, but that don't make it better.
Welcome to What's That Smell? A sometimes funny podcast about humans and their anxieties. I'm Tommy Bunny Butt Metz III.
And I'm Pete the Weast Wright.
And every week we each drag one of our deepest, darkest anxieties into the light to share it, learn about it,
and hopefully laugh about it with all of you.
And reach out, y'all. Send us the story of your little anxieties to whatsthatsmell.net. Because every week we like to have a listener submission because it gets us out of our dumb heads and into your beautiful ones. So go to whatsthatsmell.net. There's a big shiny button that says submit your anxiety, and then we will research it, talk about it, and laugh about it, and you won't be so alone. And then never the train shall meet. I did it again. All right. And with that, I'll go first. Pete.
Tom.
I know this is going to be tough to swallow, but I couldn't think of a funny way to introduce my anxiety this week. So with your permission, I'm going to just dive right in.
But you had that clever Southern thing going on a minute ago. So
I should have maybe just stuck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to think of a way to sort of ease into this, and I can't. Because I'm going through something, and I've been going through it for the past couple months, and I don't like it one bit. Can I tell you what it is?
Yeah, now I'm a little bit nervous.
I will be eating a meal. It could be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and something happens. I swallow a random bite of food, and things don't go as they should. For lack of a better term, the food gets stuck in my throat. And this happens all the time. I'm not choking. This is important. I'm not choking and I can still breathe, but it feels like the food is just sort of existing in my throat and it won't finish going down the gullet. None of this is a joke. This is all awful. And it's very disturbing because it feels like if the food sort of shifts in a certain way, it will cut off my windpipe. Again, that's never happened, but it's just having something in your throat. That's where the air comes in and out of. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Pete. It's pretty important.
God.
and I won't be able to breathe. That's what I'm worried about. If I try to drink water to force it down, it doesn't work, and I have to spit the water out. I can try
you can't swallow the water either?
Not very well, like very little, because it's like my throat doesn't have as much room in it. I can breathe, but there is an obstruction, it feels like. Trigger warning for a B below files. I can try to make myself throw up, but that also doesn't work. It just slowly figures itself out. And then everything goes back to normal.
Like the food just falls down.
It just finally falls down, and then everything is fine. And this is happening at least once a day, sometimes once a meal. Pete, it happened this morning at breakfast, and I absolutely hate it. I know you know what this is before I even say it, so I'm going to say it real quick. My anxiety this week is dysphagia, which is difficulty in swallowing. It's derived from the Greek dys, meaning bad, and phage, meaning eat. Pete, I got the bad eats.
You have the bad eats,
I got the bad eats. Now, before I move on, Pete, your wife trucks in this world with the bad eats, doesn't she?
She's a speech and language pathologist. And so she's not a swallowing specialist, but that is within the field. And so she's studied a lot about it. And when she was going to graduate school, I was riddled with anxiety because every day she was studying something else that would revolve around breathing, speaking, swallowing disorders. And so it's terrifying. And I've done my best over the last 15 years not to think about it. So
oops. I'm sorry. And then here comes Tom.
Here comes Tom. Yeah. No, what I know more than anything is I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry.
Well, it's so much better now than it was, meaning for a while I would get really panicky. We'll get into that more. I want to talk about the psychological stuff a little bit more in a second, but I just want to go over the basics of it.
Yeah. Practical question, because I love you. Yes. Practical question. Yes. When the food is down there and constraining your airway, if you breathe in just a certain way, can you make your throat whistle?
It does a real sexy cat call. Like if I breathe in real fast, it's like wee wee, and then I turn around like someone's doing it at me, and I like bat my eyes and stuff, and I live alone.
What this?
Yeah, what me? Oh, and I always have my parasol.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. All right. You were saying.
Well, to get it out of the way, because in case people are wondering, yes, I have an appointment with a specialist. It is in 2 weeks, but I made the appointment 2 months ago. That's how backed up, I guess, mouth people are.
Everybody is right now. Right.
Everybody is, because probably people have been putting it off and stuff. Yeah. So I do have something coming up. It's just going to still be a while. I do not want to go very far into the science of it all because it's not that type of podcast, but there seem to be two main causes. And of course, jump in. You're actually smarter about this probably because of your wife than I am, cum laude. But let me know. Number one main cause is an obstruction of some sort that can come from infections or scar tissue or acid reflux. And the second one is the conditions involving muscles used for swallowing, such as achalasia, where muscles in the esophagus lose their ability to relax and open to let food down. More good news. I do sometimes suffer from acid reflux. So I'm betting that that's the culprit. And the good thing is that if that is the culprit, that's going to be one of the easier fixes.
Yeah. Right. Because this has been happening for a couple of months. Has anything else changed in like your diet that would exacerbate acid reflux? I would ask, if I were a professional, I would ask that question.
I've really cut back on any spicy food. I'm not having as much. I mean, and there's really no connection that I've been able to make between certain types of foods, certain types of days. It is just from the hip. It is completely random.
Wow.
But I have found one thing that really helps and works. And this is what's the one thing when you feel like you're almost kind of choking, you probably don't want to do? Talk. Yeah. But you know what really helps? Talking.
Probably because it dislodges,
it moves
the
those
muscles.
Same muscles around. And so if I'm eating alone with Foster, I'll just tell Foster a story because it helps speed up the process. And it's very uncomfortable because it kind of sounds like this, but then all of a sudden it just goes away.
Because the food falls.
Because food falls. You got the bad eats and the good treats at the end.
You know what that's called once it's in your mouth? This is a word for you. Ready?
Chewing. Oh, once it's in your...
A bolus. You swallow the bolus.
A bolus is... Wait, so what is a bolus? Do it again.
You swallow the bolus of food.
Oh, so once it's in your mouth, it becomes a bolus?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it called? What is it called when it's stuck in my throat?
It is a rounded mass of substance, especially chewed food, at the moment of swallowing. At the moment of swallowing. You have a bad bolus.
Maybe that's my problem. I don't make a little ball. I really flatten it out. It's real long. I make it into like a really long hot dog shape, and then I swallow it
And
all
just
right away.
jam it down like a sword swallower.
And then I tell my dog a story.
Is it because I actually put all my food on a skewer and then just jam it down my throat?
Yeah. It's because I'm a cartoon cat and I eat out of the dumpster and I put the entire fish in my mouth and then I pull it back and it's just bones. These are all true. These are all true. So more than the science, I wanted to talk about the psychological effects because as I mentioned before, it took me, this has been months. And for something that happens at least once a day that lasts, for a couple minutes, it took me a long time to get over that panicky feeling that comes with the threat of not being able to breathe. Again, of not. If it had ever stopped my airway, I would have broken down the door of the specialist and be like, you're seeing me now. But because it's happened so often, I'm much calmer because I really do have real trust that it will be okay. But on the other side, I did learn how to give myself the Heimlich, just in case. Like I studied up, just in case. So it's still on my mind.
There's a difference between studying and practicing, however. Have you done any sort of Heimlich practice? Like over a chair or on your dog?
Not, well, because I'm not, and then I just fall over, and it turns out there's been something stuck in my throat the entire time.
For 60 days.
I guess I've done it at like half speed. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like I've dug in where it is. I haven't really done it because, again, I haven't needed to. I haven't been choking.
Yeah.
But there's also something that never would have occurred to me. And I did feel very alone. Spoiler alert, I'm not, but we'll get to that. There is a social anxiety element to it because it has, now that I'm seeing people more, granted outside on restaurant decks or in parks and stuff, it has happened numerous times when I've been eating with friends and it happens. And the first few times I started to panic and kind of like left. Like if it was at a park, I'd go over by a tree or desperately try to find a restroom. Now when it happens, I don't even acknowledge it at first. Mm-hmm. You really feel a spotlight on yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they can tell that I'm going through something, probably because I make this face, like my eyes get bigger. I don't look like myself. And if that happens, I will tell them what's happening. I've been suffering from this. I can breathe. If I go like this, that means I can't anymore, but this just has to happen. And I just keep talking like a weirdo and then it goes away. Mm-hmm. And it's all very kind of embarrassing. And it honestly makes me a little anxious to go out and eat with people.
What if it is because I know this is one of those things where there is the psychological barrier too. Like there are two different forks where there's the physiological challenge where your muscles and nervous system are not talking to one another. And it's
you mean leading to the difficulty in swallowing.
It's the yips for swallowing muscles,
to bring
right?
Back. Yeah.
Right. But there is also the psychological version of this, right? Phagophobia,
Okay. Yep.
which is the fear of swallowing, right? That is
sure
the other side of this, which is, and as soon as you mentioned social anxiety, that got me thinking, okay, as long as there's a social pressure involved, we know that is not strictly physiological, right?
Yeah. But do you think that's maybe like exacerbating it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't it feel like it when that spotlight comes on? As somebody who is so experienced at having the social spotlight on him all the time, I would imagine that feels pretty familiar.
But you mean that therefore, because it's always a surprise when it happens. So I'm not usually thinking about it until it's happening, and then it's kind of all I can think about.
Interesting.
So I'm not worried. But another thing is I'm probably, or at least I'm worried that I'm a little less present than I normally would be, because if it had happened earlier in the day, I'm really concentrating on chewing my food. I'm making everything into a soup in my mouth. And so that's probably like, if you're thinking about, because usually chewing and swallowing is like blinking your eyes.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to think about it, but I'm sort of forced to. So I was wondering, because the social anxiety part of it got under my mind craw, I wanted to do a teeny bit of research. And guess what, Pete? I'm not alone.
Mm.
And this goes back to 2002. In 2002, Italian scientists Ferri and Acrino studied a large number of patients with active social lives who began suffering from dysphagia. And these aren't just old people, as dysphagia happens a lot more in the elderly, but these are people across the board, including my age. They had active social lives, began suffering from dysphagia, and they found out that over half of these patients were found to be more fragile, lacking self-confidence, limiting social relationships, and consequently having a tendency to self-isolate. I'm not doing that, luckily, probably because my pull to be near or with people is just too strong, but I get it. Because it's a really scary feeling, and there's something really embarrassing about it. Something about like choking and breathing and eating, which is already kind of gross. I don't know. I wonder if it's sort of a little bit of a perfect storm. For me, it's also, as I mentioned, it's the randomness of it. It's not every bite. It's just some bites. It's not certain foods. It's not spicy foods. Not really hot, not really cold. My throat does not discriminate on when it wants to throw a speed bump in front of.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever suffered from this? You said that you try not to think about it because of your wife.
Well, sure. I try not to think about it. I feel like I have a sense memory of an experience of not being able to swallow, like not just one experience, but it has happened to me.
Yeah.
But not with food. Usually it's in some sort of like my mouth will get super dry and I just can't tell my throat swallow now. Right. I need to swallow now. And so I'll end up just like constantly, I can't even describe it where you just, it's like I'm stuck in a yawn. That's kind of what it feels like. And I go into a little panic state where I kind of freak out a little bit. It does not happen very often, right?
Okay,
I'm not like plagued with
terrible.
it.
Yeah.
But when it does happen, it is like, that feeling when you can't yawn, but when you can't swallow, there is something really debilitating about that.
Yeah.
And so I don't have that as an experience like every day, but I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I've never had any issue swallowing, but I do have a fear of it because if you can't resolve it, the path to resolution is invasive, right? Like when you start talking about feeding tubes and those kinds of things, eventually you have to eat.
Right.
So
it's not something you can just sort of live with forever if it's really impeding things, right?
Yeah. Because it can lead to all sorts of other things, eating disorders, malnutrition, like it's
dehydration. There's a lot of stuff.
Serious
drooling.
Stuff.
I put drooling at the end, like as if that's the big thing I'm worried about. Right. But drooling is a major component of it that I don't suffer from.
Yes.
As far as the dysphagias, granted, I've been suffering it for way too long. I'm getting off a little easy. In that there's also no pain for me.
Yeah.
There's psychological pain and there's nervousness and very strong uncomfortability. But some people with dysphagia have it's hurting while it's sitting in there. And I'm so lucky I don't have that.
Yeah.
The most important answer I've personally found is to help my own anxiety. Because there's not a ton, there's a lot of information about dysphagia. There's not a ton of what to do before you can get help. Or how to make yourself feel better about it, because it is largely seen of as a physical and not a mental thing.
Yeah.
The most important thing that I've found is not to try to diagnose it myself from the internet, because with everything on WebMD, I have all the face cancer. So there's just I turn all that off. That's not doing anyone. What I need to do is get a professional diagnosis and help from a doctor, which I am doing, because there's a ton of different ways to address the problem, from simple lifestyle changes to physical rehab. I remember we talked about that once before. You can, if it is a muscle thing, they can help retrain you how to swallow better. And I just wanted to bring that up because going to see a doctor might seem obvious, but that same study I mentioned earlier showed that those same amount of patients experiencing anxiety about dysphagia will often conceal or deny their condition. That study found that only 36% of those patients acknowledged that they had received a confirmed diagnosis of dysphagia, and only 32% acknowledged that they were receiving professional treatment for their condition.
Wow.
So dysphagia denial is also really real. And so because I like to share my ridiculous life on this podcast as much as I can, I also just wanted to put all this in here just in case there's someone experiencing dysphagia or has or might in the future, because it is real. It is okay. Almost always it's very easy. I shouldn't say very easy. It's non-invasive to fix, but you do have to get it worked on and checked out.
Yeah. In the meantime, you could always work on that whistle.
Oh, the doctor's going to be like, look, sir, it's not that type of office. Yeah.
We discourage that.
In business, like in life, successful partnerships can mean the difference between booming success and utter failure. This is especially true in the volatile industry of food service, as the Booty brothers found out in the mid-90s. Looking to start a chain of restaurants partnered with celebrities a la Planet Hollywood, Francesco and Tommaso Booty turned, surprisingly, to the world of fashion. Teaming up with then supermodels Naomi Campbell, Elle Macpherson, Claudia Schiffer, and Christy Turlington as the faces of the restaurant chain, the first fashion cafe opened in Rockefeller Center in New York City in 1995. It seemed like an instant success, with the chain immediately breaking ground for other restaurants in countries including the United Kingdom and Spain. But behind the scenes, the restaurant chain was flailing! Simply putting models' names next to average fare like burgers and waffle fries did not attract the general public. A writer for the San Francisco Chronicle described the food as, quote, bad. And as author Matt Haig later wrote in 2011, the connection between models and food was not an obvious one, and fashion is not a theme that makes people feel hungry. Also adding to the trouble was some of the more bizarre food options, such as the $20 salad extraordinaire, created by and for Naomi Campbell, that consisted of a glass of champagne, 2 slices of tomato, a leaf of iceberg lettuce, and a pack of Newport cigarettes. I did not make that up. Ultimately, the Booty brothers overfranchised the cafes and mismanaged the business, leading to models such as Christy Turlington to abandon the project. Models Campbell and McPherson also left after accusing Tommaso of stealing more than $10,000 a day from the business to support his lavish lifestyle. The restaurant finally closed in 1998, and Tommaso Booty was later arrested for defrauding investors in 2000, finally breaking up the partnership once and for all. Want to be in a partnership that's built to last and won't lead to any arrests? Fingers crossed? Why not become a What's That Smell Panic Pal today? For just a one-time what? Yes, one-time payment of $35, which is just a little bit more than that cartoonish and horrific salad, you will be helping pay the cost that it takes to produce this podcast for Season 6. Why, you're listening to that season right now. In addition to being an amazing person, giving us that one-time payment of $35 will also get you exclusive perks, like a pack of Newport cigarettes, JK. Not really, but you will get early access to episodes and live streams, exclusive members-only episodes, a collection of exclusive What's That Smell anxiety coupons to be used as emotional legal tender when you get the shivers, delightful stickers you can put on your face, and more. Pete and I dearly love producing this show for your eyes and ears, but all the behind-the-scenes beeps and boops do cost money. So if you like what you're hearing, why not help us cover the costs of Season 6 and become a Panic Pal? Just go to whatsthatsmell.net and click the Join Now button. Again, whatsthatsmell.net, click on Join Now. You're a Panic Pal. We're your Panic Friends. Thank you. And now, on with the show.
Tom.
Hello, Pete.
Oh, man.
Uh-oh.
This week.
This week.
All right. Let me just get into it. I have a listener submission this week.
Oh, right to it.
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
We're all
and
business.
It's a listener submission, and I read the listener submission, and I think to myself, like, it causes me to ask the big questions.
Oh.
You know, like the big questions, like, what if The Secret was real?
Oh,
like
okay,
that's
sure.
big. Or what if I'm only able to master 2 or 3 of the 7 habits? Like
Of highly successful people.
The big existential questions
Sure.
in life. Like that's the kind of scale that we're talking about this week. And it's a little bit long, but I feel like I owe it to the submitter of this to actually share the whole thing.
The whole submission.
The whole submission. It's a
Soup to
little bit.
nuts.
It's a little bit long, but I'm gonna get there.
I'm ready.
This is from Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you.
First, Catherine says, well, she didn't say anything for you to thank her for yet, but it'll get there. Here you go.
Nice try, Catherine.
Catherine says, I love this podcast.
Oh.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. Sorry, I missed my cue. In one sentence, I lost complete track. Okay, good.
The only problem is that I keep discovering anxieties I didn't realize I had. Hallelujah,
Oops.
Catherine.
Yeah.
One that I'm not sure you've talked about is deep water. More accurately, the sense of depth of water. Stay with me because
Interesting.
this goes places.
Okay.
I first discovered that it created anxiety in me when swimming laps at the pool and getting an awful feeling when I got to the point at which it suddenly got deeper. I can't describe what it is that I'm anxious about. It's not that I feel like I'm going to sink or be pulled down. It's just that it's deeper. It's just there. I've had this feeling when driving past big silos and imagining them full of water. The weirdest trigger was when I looked into my bathroom sink basin and realized that there was a pipe that goes down, which could be full of water. I'm okay with boats, swimming in the ocean, etc., but occasionally I'll get a sudden feeling of dread when I think about a little person or boat just bobbing around on the surface when there's all but just water underneath them. Now, here's the bonus anxiety-inducing, mind-bending spatial awareness for you to become aware of that Catherine carries around.
Okay.
Did you ever think that because of gravity, we are always falling, and the only reason we're not hurtling toward the center of the earth is that there's something in the way? Are you sitting on a chair?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Are you sitting on a chair right now? Take it away, and down you go until something stops you. Some rocks and dirt. If it weren't there, you'd be heading down. Slipping down a deep path? That slides right down over 6,000 kilometers, around 4,000 miles to the Earth's 6,000 degrees Celsius liquid metal core, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. Oh, except that there's a thin layer called the crust separating it from you. We're not standing on the surface of the Earth. We are being prevented from being pulled down to its center.
Oh, jeez. This is going to be contagious.
Yeah. I've carried this around with me for now weeks as we've been building this show. And I actually had in our listener submissions form, in our behind the scenes, I said, reserved by Pete, because I can't shake this feeling. I totally get it. I totally get it. All the way from the water stuff. Like I was at my son's swim meet and I was running the timing. I was timing the lanes, and I find myself in between races. Like somebody would dive in at the starting sound, and my like imagination would carry them straight through their streamline. And what if they just kept going down?
Oh, Lady in the Water style.
Yeah, Lady in the Water style. Like I totally get that obsessive thought spiral. And that's what we're talking about here. Like when you get caught on this thing that you can't shake and it causes that sort of physiological reaction. And oh my God, I get it. Now, Tom, I know we have talked about water. In fact, it was just a couple of episodes we talked about aquaphobia. So I'm going to say the water stuff, that's settled anxiety. We've talked about that before. So we're going to...
that's just an aperitif for this.
It's that's right. That's right. It's a little snifter. Snifter. You toss it around. But what I really want to talk about is the existential bit of this obsessive thought spiral main course. And that is this gravity issue. What do you think before I dig into where I went on it?
A couple episodes ago, or no, maybe it was just the exact same one. You showed me a video of people diving into water, and it was the drone shot. And if people watch the live stream, Panic Pals, you would be able to see me recoil, but you can hear me recoil and go, that's the feeling I got from you reading the existential part. Because there is something, maybe it's just super primal, but I felt for a second like falling. Emotionally, almost physically. I've never thought about this. And while you were reading, something in my mind went, because I know we don't really understand gravity. Like, we understand gravity, but not really, I'm pretty sure. What if gravity was just like, I'm done? What if gravity just turned off?
Yeah.
And we're just flying around. That's the opposite of falling, but still, it's the same. It's just being untethered. That's a really scary, profoundly interesting thing to bring up.
Okay, so I started researching this, and let me tell you, speaking of you're not alone, I found a lot of people dealing with this. And I want to read one more to you, which
Please.
I think really channels the complexity of this relationship with this particular anxiety. This person writes, and this was in a public forum, so okay. I'm going to share it. So ever since about 5 years ago, one day I was just sitting in the car and nothing bad happened. I just looked at the sun, and it was the first time I ever got this horrible feeling like gravity was going to stop working and everyone would just fall. Over the years, I struggled really bad with it, where sometimes I would be literally in tears crying during the times I had to walk outside, like to the store or whatever. I had to bring my sister everywhere with me so she could hold my hand. I'm crazy. Even when she came, that feeling still came, and I kind of felt like I was walking upwards. It's still really bad to this day. Sometimes I can walk now and I won't get that feeling, but most of the time I can't even stand outside, like at the beach or anywhere, for very long periods of time, and never in one place. I wish I could overcome this fear, because it's like holding me back in life at this point. Please don't judge. Man. No judgment. It's just
no judgment.
There is such weight
or that
to
person
this.
Is saying if they're inside, there is a roof.
Yeah, you're like, wow, protected.
Right.
There's part of that that's agoraphobia, right? Fear of open spaces.
Sure.
But you have to tie into that one that I had not heard of. You know what a barometer does, don't you?
Atmospheric pressure?
Right. And so barophobia has been used as the fear of gravity, pressure, or falling. It's right. It's tricky because sometimes this one is associated with falling down from high places. Like, sure, I have a fear of falling, and we'll call it that, and maybe you might use it as you know, a fear of gravity. But it can be extended to this sort of obsessive thought spiral. Like, I am afraid of the force of gravity not functioning, whether I'm falling up or falling down.
Oh, you can fall up. That's never, cum laude. That's never occurred to me. I've always thought of falling going from high to low, but you can fall upwards. That's what we're talking about.
Well, I mean,
no?
Maybe I'm using that. I'm being a little bit too broad in my interpretation.
But either way,
it all depends on which direction the pull of gravity is,
right?
You know, from your perspective, because up and down is just like perspective. If I were standing on my head and you were falling, you would be falling up.
Let's try it out.
Okay.
This will be a member.
So I'm just going to turn my camera upside down and do the rest of the show.
Perfect.
Upside down.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah.
I feel so bad for that person, and I feel so bad for anybody that's suffering from this, because it's always around you all the time.
Yeah. It's always around you all the time. But what if, and so there is this component of the world that we think of as settled science, that we are now to the point where we can take it for granted, because here on Earth, in this atmosphere, in this environment, on this planet, it is a trusted force, gravity. Like, we know how it works, right? But if all you can think about is what if it stops working, right? What if it stops functioning the way it does? Then what happens to us?
Well, this is something that I'm going to be thinking about for a while, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since you read the article. But thank you. What was it, Catherine?
Catherine, yeah.
Thanks, Catherine. No, just kidding. Thank you very much for submitting, Catherine. But no, it is very provocative. I sometimes have fixated just a little bit on the idea of how nothing is really solid.
Yeah.
That everything is atoms really tightly bouncing against each other. And what kind of, like, with gravity, what if whatever was holding them together just sort of stopped?
Yeah.
And everything would just sort of fly apart.
Cohesion.
Molecular, that's what I was, if you want to use the layman's terms.
That's a whole Star Trek thing where, because, I mean, that's how transporters work, right?
Oh, I never thought to ask.
Just breaking down, like, well, yeah. So, but I think about that all the time, like, because I'm a superhero nut, right? And I think about the Flash, and the Flash does this thing where he moves so fast that he can phase through solid objects, because the objects aren't really solid. He's just getting his
know he could do
molecules.
That.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's legit. Yeah. Flash is amazing. And so, you know, that is one for me that I can absolutely think about. The other thing I get messed up on when I play the piano. And so sometimes when I sit down and I stare at notes during a long sort of practice session, the world starts to like it feels like my field of vision goes to a wide angle lens. Like all of a sudden, like I can watch the world around me go from 24 millimeter to 16 millimeter to 10 millimeter, and everything gets really wide, and the notes on the page get super, super small and feels like they're coming apart.
What's that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird focus illusion thing, but
wow.
once that happens, it's both scary and cool, and I try to duplicate it and I can't, and it causes me to think about that molecular cohesion issue. Like, is the world really coming apart around me? And I can think about it right?
Yeah.
Bonkers. You know. Wow. Okay, so I am alone. It turns out this podcast is a fraud.
No, I was the one that brought up molecular cohesion. I just didn't know what it was called. So no, yeah. I'm definitely, I think I actively shy away from some of these things because I am the type of person that could fixate them on a little bit. And as we've talked about numerous times in other episodes, I like to scare myself.
Yeah.
I like
this was the
movies.
You in the basement in the dark.
Me in the basement in the dark. And we just leave it there. And the first time listeners are like, what? What is this podcast? I used to, just if you haven't listened to that episode, as a kid, and my parents were out like doing whatever parents do, I would sometimes turn off all the lights, go down in the basement, and just see if I could make myself scared by imagining that there were like ghosts and stuff like that. So I definitely have a very weird part of me that likes to think about things, but there's a downside to that.
Yeah, right.
I wonder, what if there's a lack of gravity in my throat? I want to bring everything back to dysphagia.
Well, so this gets to the part where I told you this was big, right?
Yeah.
Because this isn't just about like a fear of gravity, right?
Okay.
Because we know how to deal with the fear of gravity. You expose yourself to it, you read books about it, you watch movies that push you in that area, and then eventually you start thinking about it and exposing yourself to places, with greater height. Exposure therapy and talk therapy. It is a known issue. It is a specific phobia. It is something that, your specialist can help you through if this is debilitating, if it causes panic attacks that are debilitating. You can get to the other side of this. But the trick is, this is what I look at and think of when I think of an existential fear. Right? Okay. Do you know what I mean by like an existential fear?
I think of them as being something so big and so dehumanizing, and something so outside of yourself and so out of your control. How's that?
Yeah.
Are those words?
Yeah, no, you did it. You nailed the whole thing. Yeah.
I did it.
A lot of people think of existential fears as this, like the fear of being human. So it's like, you're overwhelmed with both personal responsibility, like, are you taking responsibility in the world and contributing in the way that you can? But more specifically, the forces at work around you have no control over. Right. That is an existential fear. So all the stuff we've talked about have all of these things come back to this discussion of taking control of your fear, right? Mm-hmm. Exposure therapy hinges on being able to take control of your fear, right? You have to be able to walk up to the ledge and force yourself to reprogram your amygdala. But you can't do that when your fear is, what if gravity stops working? That's really hard to do, right? So the reprogramming takes on a different sort of lens, I guess.
Do you know what it's like? Do you know what they do?
Well, so I found some sort of structures that what you're doing in order to reprogram your amygdala is to force yourself to ask different questions that replace the questions in your head. And so instead of saying, what happens when gravity fails, you're looking at it. The way I'm sort of thinking about it is the be careful discussion we had. Like, when you say be careful, you're programming yourself with the language of fear, right? Of that thing.
Right. So, programming your children. Right.
Yeah. Programming your children. That was the context. And so, I look at it as like, okay, if I'm afraid of the Earth's crust, like failing, and slipping into the 6,000 degrees Celsius molten hot center of the Earth. What I might say and start practicing and maybe journaling on and reciting and programming myself around is, yeah, the Earth's crust is relatively thin to, planet-eating robots. But to me, the Earth's crust is giant.
Sure.
And to me, whenever I need it, the Earth's crust is there to hold me. Whenever I need support, the crust is there. Frankly, I've never seen or heard a story of anybody falling into a volcano that didn't put themselves there in the first place. Right?
Yep.
So when you need the Earth to support you, it's there, and terra firma. Right? We just have to keep sort of going through that programming, right? Some of the language in it, you view fear as information, right? And this is a very sort of Vipassana kind of way to respond to this, which is just like observe. All you want to do is observe the data as it comes through, right? Instead of just reacting emotionally, you want to say, okay, this is a thing I'm noticing about myself. What's going on in my body right now? Is my heart racing? Is my mouth getting dry? Am I getting a little bit dizzy? Maybe I should sit down to make sure I'm protected. But just observe the data and ask yourself, like, what is there about what I'm feeling here that could allow me to be curious, right? That's what you need to you're sort of reprogramming yourself and saying, hey, I could be distracted by all of these horrible thoughts of sliding down into the Earth's center, but I'm not even going to think about that. Right now, I just want to notice I'm terrified of something. Maybe I'm going to call it Steve, and I'm going to give it a nickname like, maybe Bunny Butt. And
how dare you?
You're going to talk to it like it's somebody. You're externalizing it, right? We've talked a little bit about this before, right? This whole idea of externalizing this paralyzing existential fear in order to figure out how you might take control.
Because you're humanizing something that is, by its own definition, completely unhuman. You're bringing it into, and you did something else that was interesting. You used one of the fears of existential is the minimizing of the self. You used that as a strength, saying, to me, the Earth's crust is gargantuan. You're celebrating the fact that you are small and fairly insignificant in the large realm of things. That can also be a positive. In that way, because you're not a planet-eating robot. That's a
really good point, because gravity, in its way, is bigger than the Earth's crust, right? It is a force that's larger. And so even taking something as relatively, big to me, but small in the scope of planet-eating robots is still getting to the point where I can think about it again. Because thinking about gravity is so big, I can't think about it. I can't rationalize it. But I can when I start talking about geology. That's a settled force I can discuss, I can think about, I can learn about.
That's cool.
And, maybe move to a desert where someplace with a thick crust. Mountains, move to a mountain. I don't know where you would go. Where would you go if you wanted the thickest? Where on Earth? Where is the Earth's crust thickest?
Oh, you're
is the
again?
Earth's crust thickest?
Torrance.
What if there's an answer?
Torrance,
Atlanta
California.
Public Schools?
No.
Torrance. So it is Torrance. Let's just go with Torrance.
Great.
All right. So that's it. That's all. This is a huge thing.
This is really interesting and outstanding. And thank you so much again, Catherine, for submitting, because like you did, you brought it up into existential. We got into molecular convulsion and stuff like that. Bringing up something like this does cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Which could hopefully be helpful for people if they ever find themselves falling up or whatever.
The Earth's crust is exactly as thick as you need it to be.
And my dad always said the crust is where all the nutrients are.
Like on a pizza?
Yeah, well, no,
because I don't think that's right.
Yeah. Is that not true?
On a sandwich?
Yeah. My father's a liar. No, he just, because I never wanted to eat the crust. And so he's like, that's where the chest hair is.
Whoa.
If you eat it, it puts hair on your chest.
I don't even know how to do that.
That's what he meant to say. He meant to say, if you eat the crust of a sandwich, it puts hair on your chest. Unfortunately, he said, your sandwich is filled with chest hair. My parents are a handful.
Macaroni and chest hair.
take it back to 95. Before we had this drama in our lives. Just staring at the screen every day and night. I miss the rush of living in real life.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode. This week's tune is Back to 95 by Michael Shines. Coming up next week. And it seems that the same test, like you were saying, did not affect men in the same way at all, because they were too busy trying to knock things over with their penises. I don't know, whatever men do. Note to self, pull-ups. Just like our
8 a.m. Monday, don't eat a bagel.
right, yeah.
Right?
Quiche is not a cardio exercise.
What if I put a McNugget on a stick?
Is the stick like a? Do you
What
call
if it's a bone-shaped stick?
a bone a finger stick? No, I don't think that will work. Then that's just a horrible lollipop.
Until then, I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Tommy Metz III. Thank you so much for downloading. We will be back next week on What's That Smell?
Go get your DeLorean. Yo, what you got in that bag? Candy, cigarettes, and a Playboy mag. Man, you used to have to work for that. Wait for me, gotta dial up. Can't call my landline cause it's all tied up. Just bike over then. Oh.